The Florida Gators added to their 2026 recruiting class with defensive lineman Kendall Guervil. You are a Florida Gator.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever in the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Thursday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. And today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. And yesterday, we of course went live when this happened, but defensive lineman Kendall Guervil committed to the Florida Gators. He is a 4-star on all platforms, 6'4", 6'5", 315 pounds. And we spoke about this recruitment a lot. We're not doing a scouting report episode today. We'll do that another day. Probably going to wait for this weekend to wrap up where hopefully Florida will have 3 guys and we can just do a full scouting report show. But I will tell you this. I like the film. I like the film for Kendall Guervil. But so he was deciding between Florida, Texas, and Florida State. And we'd been talking about this for a while. We talked about it a lot this week, but we've talked about it before. We touched on it before where when he went on his official visit a few weeks ago to Florida, we were speaking about him on this show as, hey, he might be, it's a long shot, but he might commit while he's on campus. Because for me, and I think for many Florida Gators fans or many people that follow recruiting in general, I think a lot of people viewed it as Florida was top 2 in this recruitment. I think that a lot of people viewed that. That's how I viewed it, at least, was that Florida was top 2 in this recruitment. And if you're top 2 in the recruitment and you get the kid on campus, you can move yourself to top 1, especially in a case like Kendall Guervil, where we've talked about, and it's not been secretive. I wasn't the one that said it, but it's not been secretive that NIL is a factor, okay? And when you get a kid on campus and NIL is a factor, if you could drop enough money, you could probably land him. That obviously didn't happen. But since then, Florida has kind of felt like a quiet favorite for Kendall Guervil, and then it felt like Texas was the quiet favorite or public favorite, but, you know, it's not like he's coming out there and saying it. And so we've had a little bit of a wishy-washy one. I know that in the final 3 was Florida, Texas, and Florida State. But like I've been saying, I don't think Florida State was truly in it like that, or to the extent that people – like I don't know anybody that thought he was going to go to Florida State. And I know Florida State added another defensive lineman. I don't care if you add another defensive lineman. You're not going to go, yeah, well, we'll take 3 guys, and he's not going to be one of them. Come on. And if you talk to a Florida State fan that says that to you, tell them to pull their head out of their ass because they are just completely wrong. Kendall Guervil chose Florida. Again, Florida State was out of this a while ago, I believe. Just because, again, the way that I look at it is that they were so quiet and Florida and Texas were not that quiet. And that seems like a weird approach because that's just not usually how things go, where all the schools are not quiet. One school is, and that's the school that's actually in it or actually leading. And so that's why I think that Florida State wasn't actually in it. But again, either way, he made a great decision, right? He made a great decision to decide between Florida or Texas. And Florida now has their I don't know if he's going to finish as the top defensive lineman that they're going to land, but they've got a defensive lineman in Kendall Guervil that is now the 2nd highest ranked commit in the class behind only CJ Hester. And that when it's all said and done, if he ends up being the highest rated defensive lineman, or if he ends up being the best defensive lineman in the class, I'm cool with it. Like I think he's a very, very talented defensive lineman. Think that he's going to be able to contribute in multiple ways, which, you know how when we talk about offensive linemen with Florida recruiting, we talk about, well, you know, they're athletes, they're long, they're very aggressive guys, all that stuff that we talk about with them. I think that when we talk about the defensive line, one of the things that we're talking about, and I'm not saying straight up edge rushers, but I'm not talking about the jack. I'm talking about guys that are playing defensive line hand in the dirt on just about every down. When we talk about them, we are almost always talking about being able to line up and contribute in multiple spots. And that's something that Florida continues looking for, and that's something Kendall Guervil is going to be able to do. We'll see what happens when he gets, a Florida strength and conditioning program. We'll see how that develops and how he develops there. But he's someone who's going to be able to contribute in multiple spots. And again, NIL was a factor here. And I'm harping on that so much and to an annoying level, and I understand that. But I'm doing it because of the annoying level of NIL complaining I see on social media. I open Twitter and it's, we didn't get him because he dropped the bag. We didn't get this because that. I'm just tired of hearing it. Like, again, my thing with Florida is not that they don't have the money. It's that they, again, choose to be fiscally conservative with going to acquire new talent. They try to get their talent however they get their talent. And then it seems that they're more willing to spend on keeping guys, which I'm not complaining about, really. I don't. I think that's a fine approach. I think a lot of Florida Gators fans just get annoyed at constantly hearing the reason you didn't get a guy is because someone outbid you. In which case, I will also say that's not always true, right? Like, people can try to chalk it up like that, but that's not always true. But they are willing to spend the NIL in certain situations. That's what it's just the willingness to spend it varies depending on the recruit. I don't know how they figure out the exact value that they're willing to spend, but I do know that it varies, and that's fine. Florida is spending on an elite defensive lineman. I'm happy with it, right? And again, similar to how we've talked about before, you can tell. I think the way to look at it this cycle is you can tell who the very talented defensive linemen are, because if they've got any combination, any two of these three schools in that recruiting list, then they're probably a serious defensive lineman and a very talented one. And if you see Florida, Texas, Georgia, those three, if you see two of those three, you're looking at a pretty good football player. And I think that's the measure for it. And yeah, you lost out on Preston Carey if you're Florida earlier this week, but you landed someone I think that is considerably better. Like I said, I think that Preston Carey is more of a bottom of the roster guy. Which I saw someone get mad at me for saying that. I'm not saying he's bad, because they were like, if Georgia wants him, he's not a bottom of the D-line class guy. And it's like, it doesn't mean anything, because I'm just saying that you shouldn't take defensive linemen that are worse than him in your class. That's it. That's not saying he's bad. I still think he's good. It's just, not trying to have people worse than that in the class. I don't think that's a winning strategy. But Florida landing Kendall Guervil was huge. Will hopefully settle some of the fan base until Florida gets their next commit, whenever that might be. Just might be today. We're going to talk about that when we get back with Locked On Gators. You ever wish managing your money just felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. And it's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's so much more than that. It's a complete financial command center, so you can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and all of your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year with monarchmoney.com. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free, wherever it's in podcasts and on YouTube. And like I mentioned, Florida could be adding to their recruiting class today. We spoke about this a few times this week alone, but cornerback CJ Hester is committing today. He's a 4-star everywhere, but he's a 3-star on 24/7. And when we spoke about him initially to start this week, we were saying, hey, he's either committing July 1st or July 3rd. Those were the dates we were told. And then July 1st came and went, and we're like, okay, well, it's July 3rd. And again, that's fine. It's not like, we were waiting on anything. It's just how it happened. But CJ Hester is committing today, and I'm going to be honest, I think it's Florida. Like I've been saying all week. Like I just and even for longer than that. Like I think it's Florida. It just feels like Florida. It feels like the Florida kind of move that we would see here. And again, we've spoken about this a bit, but CJ Hester, while the recruitment has gotten quiet at times, CJ Hester has always been and will continue to be a priority target for the Florida Gators in this 2026 recruiting class. It's down to Florida, Iowa, and Georgia for Hester. And I don't think we need to harp too much on that. We spoke about it yesterday, that development plays a big part there. Playing time plays a big part there. And Florida, you've got a lot of young guys hey, CJ Hester, you can come in and compete right away. Like I think that's what Florida would tell them. I think Florida would be able to say, hey, you can come in and compete right away. Can't guarantee you playing time, of course, but you can come in and compete right away because it's not like we've got a corner room full of seniors next year. So you can come here and compete right away. Georgia, probably going to tell them the same thing because Georgia, I think, and Florida are both going to be schools where they go, hey, we won't promise you a starting spot right away, but we will give you the opportunity to come in and compete. We will. Like, you can come in and earn that. We're fine with it. Iowa, I do think that they're going to be able to go, hey, well, I mean, you got, again, I think most coaches aren't going to guarantee anything, but I do think Iowa's more likely to go, hey, well, you got a really good shot at earning playing time from day one here. Development, again, I've said before, like, I don't really know how much Georgia is developing these guys because they get to the NFL and so many of them flame out. And I know the NFL is just a different beast, but like I mentioned earlier this week, it could be similar like when Nick Saban was at Alabama earlier in his tenure. He was sending a bunch of guys to the league and a bunch of them weren't panning out. And part of it was just because of the way that he coaches cornerbacks and the way that they were going through the side shuffle in coverage, like the way that he was talking about those or the way that he was teaching them, they weren't translating. And that was just how that was going with Nick Saban DBs. Maybe that's happening with Georgia. Maybe they're just merchants behind elite defensive line talent. Those guys are getting to the league and succeeding. Linebackers are getting to the league and succeeding. Corners, or DBs in general from Georgia, just not as much. So there's that. But like I've said, Florida, they want to take 2 corners now in the class. I still believe that late in the cycle, we'll see them turn around and say, hey, you know what? Actually, we want to add a third. Who should we add? Who's the guy? And so I still think that we'll see that at some point. But for now, Florida wants to add 2 corners to their 2026 recruiting class. And they added CJ Brono a couple of weeks ago. At around the time things started heating up with CJ Brono, they kind of slowed their recruitment of other corner targets. But someone that they didn't slow their recruitment on was CJ Hester. And to me, that said a few things, right? And I've said this before as well. I've talked about this, like my stance on why I feel really confident that Florida is going to land CJ Hester. Again, I don't really talk to people that are super in the know about recruiting stuff. I don't really do that much. But the way that I look at it is, if like from Florida's perspective, if we feel really good about landing CJ Brono, if I'm on the staff, I feel really good about landing CJ Brono. Boom, that's one of my 2 corners. If I have let's say CJ Hester is the top target left. If he's on the board, if I feel really good about landing him, I'm gonna cool off on some other targets. But like if I think there's a legitimate shot that I'm not landing CJ Hester, then I'm gonna keep pushing on Hester, but I'm also gonna keep pushing on the lower priority targets. Like Brody Jennings is a name that we've spoken about where that's cooled off. And part of that was the CJ Brono commitment. And so if I didn't feel really confident about CJ Hester, I wouldn't cool off on Brody Jennings. I'd be like, all right, cool, we got CJ Brono. Let's keep pushing for CJ Hester, but also let's not ignore Brody Jennings and make him feel like, oh, they don't really care about, I'm not a priority for them, because that's obviously not a great feeling to feel if you're a recruit. So the way that I look at it from Florida's side is you've got to be really confident that you're going to land CJ Hester. if once you land CJ Bronaugh, or before you even land CJ Bronaugh, you start cooling off on other targets. And so that's just why I've been saying that I feel like that's such a good indicator for Florida of why that would be the most likely outcome, or why I think CJ Hester is going to wind up with the Gators, is just because like it doesn't make sense to cool off on other targets if you're not really confident in that. And maybe they were really confident in it without actually knowing, right? Like maybe CJ Hester never gave them the green light, the reassurance that, yeah, like I'm going to be a Gator. Maybe he never gave them that. And maybe they just did feel really confident about how things were going. Would be a crazy, like complete psycho move, but maybe that's the outcome. Maybe that's what it was. Either way, I think that the way Florida moved tells me that they feel really good about their odds of landing CJ Hester today. And again, when they're only taking 2 corners for now, I know that the number is the, hey, we want to take 2 corners in this class. Just knowing them, I feel like they're going to add a third guy at some point late in the cycle, just a tall, long, athletic, developmental piece that they just go, hey, man, like we'll just add you and we'll develop you and you'll be great. Because they've done that at a lot of positions, but basically every year there's a DB that is usually pretty lower ranked, and they add him, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden he's a dude. Like Greg Smith was one. Teddy Foster was a bit earlier in the cycle, but he was kind of that same makeup, I guess we'll say, at outside corner. So I think that for Florida, feeling good about CJ Hester is a pretty clear thing here. And again, like not just having your 2 corners commit, but being able to say at any position, hey, we're done for now, is huge, because you get to reallocate the resources of coaches that are helping recruit, right? Like whoever is helping recruit CJ Hester, let's say, just hypothetically, let's say it's Billy Napier, Ron Roberts, Deron Wilson, and Chad Lucas. Let's just say those 4 are the guys recruiting CJ Hester, or recruiting the cornerback room in general. We'll say recruiting cornerback room. Once you land your corners and you go, hey, we've got our 2 that we really want for the class. If we add a third, we add a third, but that's later. But we've got our 2 for now. Then you can go, all right, well, now, Chad, you can go speak to these guys. Ron, you can go speak to these guys. Like Billy can go, hey, I'm going to prioritize my time elsewhere now. Like that's a big advantage, to be able to have positions and go, hey, we're shutting it down right now. Like we're good at these positions. We'll circle back and keep contact with these guys that we have, but we don't need to spend as much time watching film on other guys in this position, constantly contacting other guys in this position. We don't need to do that much. And I think that's a big advantage. So if you can wrap up corner early, you've already reportedly been done on offensive line, aside from a couple +1 options. Like you've got guys that can really be spread out and start hammering certain positions and keep going there. And so Florida can do that. Could be a big advantage for the rest of the 2026 recruiting cycle. There's one more guy committing this week that we're talking about today. We'll get there on Locked On Gators. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And the last player committing this week that we are talking about today is Lakeland linebacker Malik Morris. He is a 4-star on all platforms, 6'1", 225 pounds, just an absolute dude. And he's so damn good that many people I've spoken to, who I actually value their opinions, I'm going to be honest, there's a bunch of people I talk to that I just, like, I'm not paying attention for the in-depth stuff if I don't know that you can do it. That think, hey, Malik Morris is way better than the ranking. And he might be. You really might be. His film looks pretty damn good. I haven't gotten the in-depth watch, but I've just watched him to watch him, and he looks pretty damn good. He's also another player that we can talk about as the look at who's recruiting them, look at who's offering them kind of guy, because, well, he's got a lot of people recruiting him that are usually thought of as some pretty significant players in recruiting. And so I think that's usually a pretty good indicator there for Malik Morris, who, by the way, I don't even remember if I said it, but he is planning on committing tomorrow. So 4th of July is when he's going to be announcing his decision. I think it's going to be Florida. I think that a lot of people feel that Florida is in the lead right here. And I don't think that that's, surprising at all. I feel like many people, like when he took his official visit to Florida, 3 weeks ago at this point, a lot of people thought, hey, he might commit while he's right there. He took an unofficial the following week, and people thought, hey, he might commit while he's right there, especially because he took the unofficial. And I think that was a sign for a lot of people. I think a lot of us just went, hey, Florida's probably leading for Malik Morris right now. It's been a conversation that's happened. It's been things that have been talked about, or it's been something that's been talked about. But I do think that because he didn't just take an unofficial, right? He took an official, and then the next week took an unofficial. And I think that was a really strong indicator for people. And then when you also consider that he took his OV to Miami first, then he took his OV to Texas A&M, then he took his OV to Florida, and then he was supposed to take a midweek OV to Colorado, and he was supposed to take a midweek OV to Missouri. Neither of those last two OVs happened. I don't know the exact reasoning for not taking the Colorado one. Maybe it's because he made up his mind about where he was going, and he's like, hey, I don't need to see anymore. Don't know. But I do know that he canceled the official visit for Missouri that would have been on June 20th to take an unofficial to Florida that weekend. And similar to, was it Jarayla McCoy? It's like, yeah, you had an official scheduled and then you canceled it to take an unofficial to Florida. That's usually a pretty good indicator. And I'll be honest, when he took the unofficial in Gainesville, I thought that he was going to commit. I did, just because I was like, oh, he's taking the unofficial. He's doing it. But instead, he hasn't done that. He did set the date shortly after that because he was also someone who was like, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with Malik Morris's timeline, we were kind of just like, hey, probably some point in July. And then that was kind of all we had, right? Like, we didn't really have a date or even a more specific range than that. But it ended up being, hey, 4th of July is going to be the commitment date. And it's going to be likely the hats, if there's hats, are going to be Florida, Miami, and Texas A&M. But again, it feels like Florida. By a lot, I think, too. And we spoke about this either yesterday or 2 days ago, where I think it was On3's Miami site had reported that, hey, Miami's not really recruiting Malik Morris that much anymore. They're backing off. And I never really got an answer as to why. I didn't see an answer as to why they would have backed off. And I don't think it was a talent thing, because he's incredibly talented. And if you do think it's a talent thing, you won't be coaching for much longer, right? Hopefully. But I do think that the reason that Miami may have backed off on Malik Morris is simply they knew they weren't getting him. Like something, or they felt they weren't getting him. Like something gave them an indicator that, hey, he's going to commit and it's not going to be to Miami. And so they backed off, saved their resources, And so I do think that there's a pretty good indicator there that it's not Miami. Haven't heard much about Texas A&M since his official visit there. So Florida does feel like the favorite in that regard as well. And Florida right now is leading for Malik Morris, leading for DQ Forkwa from IMG, the linebacker, and leading for Isaiah Williams, who is a former Florida Gators commit and then flipped to Ole Miss. They are all still in the fold. And I've talked about the three of them, and I don't know if I didn't explain it as well the other day when I spoke about it, but I would take all three. I know there's people that don't like Isaiah Williams because of the way that his recruitment process has gone. I don't care. My job is to look at the film and give my opinion of the film. I'm not talking to these kids. I don't know what they're like. I don't know what they're looking for. I don't know these things. So I'm not going to judge them based off those things. What I am going to say is that based on the film, I would take all three gladly. And I'm also someone that I've said I think Isaiah Williams long-term might be better suited to the edge. I'll take him as a linebacker and say, hey, man, we're going to play you as an overhang sometimes, and we're just going to figure things out. I would do that gladly. I don't care. Treat him like Childs. That's it. Sometimes you're off ball. Sometimes you're on the edge. We're going to figure it out. We're going to have some fun, but you're going to be a dynamic playmaker for us. And that's a fine approach. I would take all three gladly, especially because you've got Pup Howard and Jaden Robinson this year. And let's say that you get both of them back for 2026. That 2026 season would be Pup and Jaden Robinson's last, regardless of how it goes. Unless there's, God forbid, I'm going to knock on wood now, an injury that gives him a redshirt year. And you'd also have Miles Graham and Childs both draft eligible after the 2026 year. I would take three linebackers in this class. I've been saying I would take three linebackers in this class because you are dangerously close to being thin in 2 or 3 years at linebacker. And yes, you can supplement with the portal, of course, but I don't like to say, oh, we'll just attack it in the portal. And until you're there. I don't like planning to hit the portal in the future. I hate that. So I do think that Malik Morris, DQ Forkbutt, and Isaiah Williams are all very much in play for Florida in this 2026 recruiting class. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, wherever it's in the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow at the absolute latest. Hopefully we'll be back today. Talk more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I will see all of you at the absolute latest tomorrow.